that's okay with you. Okay, terrific. That's what we'll do then. So at this juncture, we'll pick up with solid waste and recycling annual rate review findings and recommendation with Mira Samantel and Thomas Eggleston. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon. The chair mentioned, my name is Mira Samantel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. We are pleased to be here before you today. We have two agenda items that are back to back, but they are separate. So we'll just remain at the table after this first one. The second one, and the first one, as the chair mentioned, is a solid waste and recycling annual rate review findings and recommendation. And I will turn it over to Tom Eggleston.
Mira, good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. As Mira mentioned, we do have two back-to-back agenda items that are very linked together. So the second one should be fairly brief. Go ahead and get started on talking about the rate review for this year. So a quick overview of our rate review presentation. We're going to have an overview of the purpose and desired outcome, the policy questions before your board today, the rate review process, the findings from this year's rate review, talk about a proposal for urban unincorporated residential foods waste collection program, some stakeholder engagement, and staff recommendation. First, to frame the conversation, the purpose is to provide your board with an overview of the annual garbage and recycling rate review analysis and for findings regarding service in unincorporated Washington County. And our desired outcome is for your board to provide direction to staff to regarding the proposed collection rate adjustments and authorize staff to return with an action item on the 27th of June. The policy questions before your board today are twofold. First is, should the garbage and recycling collection rates be adjusted to maintain a 10% return on revenue for certificated haulers who are our franchisees? And second, should the garbage and recycling collection rates be further adjusted for urban unincorporated residential customers to include food waste in the yard debris collection program? We'll come back to those at the end. So a quick overview of our rate review process. We do have an annual rate review process here in Washington County. It starts on March 15th of each year when our detailed cost reports are due from each of our franchised solid waste collectors. Those reports are reviewed and for accuracy and consistency by staff and our CPA firm, Marina and Company. We do have a enhanced review or a site visit for the top, look at my notes real quick. Top certificate holders by revenue, totally no less than 75% of system revenue, so that we can do a double check to make sure that the supporting documentation agrees with the reported documentation. And we also have the ability to pull in extra certificate holders if we see anomalies in their DCRs as well, which is the detailed cost report acronym. The fourth step is we make adjustments based on data inconsistencies. For example, if we know disposal should be at $135 a ton and we see some coming in at $300 a ton, we would say that might be a data entry error. We'll check with the franchisee, make sure they agree with those adjustments, and we'd make those adjustments in the DCRs. We then consolidate the reports all together to have one composite. So we start with 9 or 8 reports now that we have 8 franchisees, and we can create one master document that's a composite for the whole system. Then we look at the system return on revenue based on the composite, and we make or propose adjustments necessary to return that to the target ROR of 10%. We then go to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. We did that on May 18th and received a recommendation for your board to consider in your decision making as well. And now we're here today for board review and board action this month. And then we would move to notifying customers depending the decision, and then rates would be adjusted for customers at the end of the process. And this is all for unincorporated Washington County, and that includes everything outside of the cities, including the rural areas for all lines of service, commercial, drop box, and residential. Taking a look at the findings from this year's rate review, total revenue collected by the system was a little over $41 million this year. The income collected or earned by the system was about $2.6 million, and that turned out to be a 6.35% return on revenue. Return on revenue is the calculation we use, which is essentially our revenue minus our expenses, which is our income or profit, and then our profit divided by our revenue, and that gives us that barometer. When we break down by line of service, what's that?
Define income, profit for us. Thank you. Can you define profit for me?
Profit is revenue minus expenses.
Well, that's the obvious, but what's in expenses?
So cost of drivers, cost of trucks, cost of disposal.
Owner salaries?
Yes, salaries are part of that. We have a related party scale that, so if the owner is also the manager or the president, then we have a related party scale. that
They can pay,
charge.
you can pay yourself a salary.
Yep.
And you can recover depreciation on what basis?
Depreciation, you're asking?
Yeah,
Yeah, 7-year depreciation schedule on assets, so garbage trucks and facilities and things like that.
pretty much a tax basis, okay. Anything else weird in there? We don't,
Not that I'm aware of. There might be some details in there that we could follow up on the side if you have more questions.
Okay.
So we're breaking down return on revenue by line of service. We see that residential operated at a 6.76% return, commercial 7.13, Dropbox went down to 3.11. And then combining those together and average them, that brings us to our 6.35. Looking at a little bit about what contributed to this change. Last year, we actually did some rate decreases because we came in above at around 13%. We did see that the overall system increased revenue by 4.7%. So that's growth in customer base, return of some commercial sector activity, things like that. We also saw that direct costs of operations outpaced that and came in with a 12.3% increase. And that was related to fuel costs, which increased by 58% year over year. Solid waste disposal costs went up by 11%. Recycling processing costs went up by 56%. And that's just the volatile recycling markets took a big dip at the end of last year. And that really hurt the system by the tune of almost $1 million. Driver wages went up 7.7%. Vehicle repairs were up 27%, but related to that, we saw depreciation decrease by 20%. And that's because they're having trouble buying new equipment because of the supply chain issues. So there's more costs maintaining older trucks as they're waiting for new trucks to come in. We also saw a 7.2% increase in indirect costs, and that administrative salaries, corporate overhead, training expenses, those kinds of things. So looking at rate adjustments to get us back to this 10% return, residential sector would need to collect an additional $1 million. And that would be a 3.6% increase in rates. And for the average customer that, uses a 32-gallon garbage can, which about 70% of our customer base uses that size can, that's a 96 cents per month increase. Commercial, a little over $250,000 in revenue needed to bring back to that target. That's a 3.19%, about $8.41 for a 4-yard container picked up once a week. And then Dropbox compactor needs to earn a little bit over 400,000, and that's a 7.66% increase, a little bit bigger, and that is about $12.82 per haul on a 10-yard box.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I didn't quite catch percent of use of a 32-gallon.
Close to 70% of our customers are in a 32-gallon can.
I did hear it, write it down right. Thank you. Interesting factoid.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah. Moving on, we also have an opportunity this year to help meet some of our goals, some of our sustainability goals and our waste diversion goals, to add food waste collection to our system. We are one of the last jurisdictions in the region, and we've been constrained by several factors. And I'll go over those that have opened up for us here. Facility capacity at the Recology North Plains facility. You might recall last year they completed a update and added about 28,000 tons of capacity to that facility, a new modern mass bed composting system with in-bed aeration. It's pretty awesome. If you ever wanted to take a tour, we can arrange that.
Is it the same technology that they were previously using, or just an expansion, or?
Same methodology. So they're still called aeration compost or positive aeration. I'm not sure if I get the technical terms correct. Still the same concept, but they've created with a mass bed, they can create one big pile that has aeration in the ground underneath.
Okay.
And so they can kind of fill the voids
Yeah.
and compost more material on the same footprint.
Okay.
And control it better with computers can tell exactly how hot it is in the middle of the pile. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, an investment made.
Yes. So that opened up some capacity for the type 3 feedstock, which is yard debris with food waste, has to have a special permit from DQ. Opened up a little bit of capacity there in our neck of the woods. And then we had the Japanese beetle quarantine effort that was playing out in the Cedar Mill, or still is in the Cedar Mill neighborhood. The Department of Ag has is not enforcing their quarantine this year because of budget constraints, and they are winning the battle over the Japanese beetle. So they're down to about 2,000 they trapped, I think, last year. They did offer, on a side note, if your board is interested, maybe later this fall when things are more openings on your agenda, they can come give us an update on that project. But this allowed us to, they're not deep burying the yard debris collected curbside at the Hillsborough landfill anymore. And so that allows us to shift this over to a composting process because the Hillsborough landfill couldn't have taken if it had food in it. So kind of removed that constraint.
I have a question, but would you
Yeah.
like me to wait till the end?
If it's about this, please jump in.
It's about this. I live in the city of Portland, and so I do use this food waste collection process. And what's interesting to me is that it's reduced my garbage by a lot. So is there, as you look at the collection piece, if this were to start, how does that balance out? I mean, you don't have any more garbage, you just have it in a different bin.
Yeah. Good question. We've done some analysis. We have some projections and estimates. We think that we would save, oh, I don't have the number on here, about $200,000 in disposal fees by garbage that would have been paid at the garbage dump to throw away that weight of material. And that's would then shift into the yard debris cart. And so we would then pay to throw that at a lower rate into the yard debris composting process. But it's not that simple because when you take yard debris without food, it's cheaper to dispose of when you add food. So we're adding food into the yard debris and then we're taking the whole quantity and having to dispose of it at a little bit higher cost, but that cost savings is part of that. We're looking at diversion numbers where we're estimating that 27% of our residential garbage by weight is food. And we don't think in our projections that we're going to capture 100% of that. There's a lot of reasons people wouldn't participate. The ick factor is a big one, or when the yard debris is not, when we're not generating much yard debris in the winter or summer, the bin is just food in it. It's difficult for people to manage those systems. There's a variety of factors, and I think just adoption is one thing. I don't know if I answered your
So-
question, but I'm
Yeah,
kind
you
of talking
did.
around it.
No, you did, but another factor, and I'm sure this is in your calculation, is that my garbage is only picked up every other week, whereas my food and
Portland.
yard is picked up every week.
Yeah.
So the food doesn't sit there
Yes.
for
Yep.
a long period of time.
Yeah. So the proposal that we have before you today, or the recommendation from staff, is that we do not adjust frequency.
Oh, okay.
We leave it at every other week and we just add food. And that's how we're able to do it at, I think we'll see on the next slide, at 1.93%
So
cost.
the yard
increase.
debris would be picked up every other week with
Yep.
food?
And they do that in Hillsborough. They've done that for now 2 years in Hillsborough. Olympia's done it for about 6-7 years.
'Cause mine's the
And
river.
Tigard's been doing that now since January, so we know it's tested.
Yeah.
I think we would maybe get more participation at weekly, but it's a cost benefit kind of a calculation that we would need.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging my.
I had this service in my prior neighborhood in the city of Beaverton and absolutely loved it.
Good.
In my current neighborhood, I was going to wait till the next slide, but I think it perhaps is pertinent here. In my current neighborhood in the city of Beaverton, we have an HOA. And with that, a landscaper does all of the what limited landscape maintenance there is. So there are no yard debris bins. And so it causes a difficulty because we are paying into the city of Beaverton program and not getting service. And I will continue to persist both with the city and my HOA to get food composting available to us. Because no, it's not at all icky. From my experience, for years of using it, absolutely loved it. But I don't know how prevalent we may have neighborhoods throughout urban unincorporated Washington County who may be in a similar situation. So I just wanted to raise that as a case so that there are a means for community members such as mine having this experience to report to you that they have it so that we are better prepared to come up with a solution for those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Thank you.
for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. Let me get through the slide and we can talk about that a little bit more too. I think it's relevant to the next slide a little bit. How
Okay.
we've structured the rate proposal, the rate adjustment proposal. I would also say another factor that's changed recently is we have added transfer capacity in our region. We were a little worried about food waste and that if we had one single point of failure, essentially Recology North Plains, and that something happened there, then we'd have nowhere to take it. Pride has recently started transferring type 3 food waste at their facility in Sherwood. So that creates an outlet that we have a little more system resiliency that's new this year as well. And then finally, I think you all have heard this. We hear this all the time. Community member demand is high. This is the most asked for program we get when people just reach out and say they want better services from their garbage companies. We hear a lot about food scraps. So this does improve environmental outcomes and it reduces our environmental impact. Like I mentioned, food makes up about 27% of our residential garbage by weight. When it decomposes in landfills, it produces methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas, and composting reduces methane emissions and would also aid in the development and creation of nutrient-rich soil amendments. So the next slide. So talking a little bit about the rate proposal here, one thing we wanted to make sure when we did this analysis with Marina and company was to ensure that any rate increase that's directly related to the food waste collection program is isolated to those that receive the service. So this kind of speaks to your question. So we really were carefully carved out urban residential only services and applied the rate only to urban residential only services. So if there's a community in a multifamily complex that is not have yard debris as part of their suite of services, they would not be paying into this cost of this program. It's strictly isolated to residential services, which is 5-plex and below, or townhomes that have individual can cart set outs in front of each one of them. So I can speak more with Beaverton and try to understand the situation with the HOAs. I've heard that there's a challenge with bin size and trying to get the bins in the garages. And then also talking about a shared container that the communities could use together.
That's the problem. We have shared containers for dog poop and not a single.
Not for food
shared
scraps.
container for food scraps. So prioritize dog poop.
We can make it
for
work, right?
Food waste.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be nice.
Presumably you're not throwing your garbage on the lawn.
No,
So-
no.
I guess that you could.
And I applaud everyone picking up their dog poop
Yeah.
because it's not good for our surface water.
So for the rate impacts on this program, we would have to account for the base increase that we're discussing as well, which is a 3.6% that we went through. And then to add food scraps on top of that for the urban unincorporated residential customers only, we would be looking at an additional 1.93%, which is about 48 cents per month for those 32-gallon customers. So when you combine those two, it's moves to a 5.53%, which is about $1.44 per month for that customer as well. Some stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned, we went to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting on the 18th. They had a good discussion about this, lots of questions. At the end, they moved to unanimously recommend that your board adopt the rate increase and the food scraps collection program. We also have adopted a new practice, and this is the second year where we send out notification to an interested parties list that the GRAC is reviewing garbage and recycling collection rates, and this is an opportunity to provide comment. We didn't receive any comment regarding this topic at that meeting. We did on the rules, which we can talk about in a second. And then we also worked closely with the Washington County Haulers Association throughout the rate review, and we received support from them. And I think your board received a letter from them last night as well. So back to our, never mind, staff recommendation, got ahead of myself. We recommend, staff recommends the following rate adjustments become effective August 1st, 2023. A 3.6% increase for rural residential, 5.53% rate increase for urban residential to include food waste collection, 3.16% for commercial service, and a 7.66% for Dropbox compactor service.
Is the 5.53, what is that average? Did I see it before?
144
Thank you,
per
thank
month
you.
for that 32-gallon customer. And then back to our policy question, which is, should your garbage and recycling collection rates be adjusted to maintain the 10% ROR? And should food scraps be added to urban residential customers?
So colleagues, does anyone have any additional questions? And then I think we should go one by one around the room with regard to the policy questions. So
The only other question I'd have, if you're into that
Yep.
right now, is Those rates don't take into consideration, I presume, any, I know, thank you. I need one probably right on my head. That would be better, you know. I
We
would.
can get that for you.
Okay. That'd probably be good. What metro tipping fees and all the rest, what? If
Yeah.
they're going to pay those additional costs, that would obviously change that margin. I'm what's troubling me about these margins, labor costs are up 9 to 8, 9, 10, 11%. I don't know how they're doing it that cheap, but you know, for 5% increase, I'm glad they are. But I'm just looking at any other angle that they might have that they're going to be exposed to.
Yeah, so last year, our solid waste disposal costs increased by about 1.1 million over the year before, and that was 11% increase. Most of that was related to the tip-free increase. And then private transfer stations also had commensurate increases across the region as well. This year, Metro did also increase the fees effective July 1st. And they moved to an 11% increase this year as well. So that will certainly impact the system. And we'll see that in next year's rate review pursuant to our current practices. Our current practice in Washington County is a look back. We look back at the full year prior and we take those costs and expenses or revenues and expenses and we kind of calculate what it would have taken to get 10 then, and we add that. So we're kind of know that we're dealing with some regulatory lag. Our practices do allow us to look forward in cases of extreme circumstances. We did that in 2021 with a 17% increase at a Metro tip fees. But that was the difference then was we knew about that in December of the year prior. So we had 6 months to kind of internalize it and actualize it and think about how we would project that cost on the system. This decision most recently was made like a couple of days before our GRAC meeting. And so we didn't have time to give it a full reaction and give it a full analysis. And we debated with the Haulers Association and we all agreed that we could carry forward.
Follow-up question, and then
Yeah.
I'm done. Is it I anticipated that you might have said what you just said, and so you ever think about at least doing a biennium or maybe even so far as a 3-year policy, because crazy swings are, nobody likes them. You know, in business, we don't like them because it's really hard to react that way.
Yeah.
The public doesn't like them because they said, well, you guys were real good last year, but boy, are you terrible this year. I mean, look at your spiking your rates. So it's smooth. I like the smoothing.
Yeah.
You just don't do that. Why does it have to be an annual review?
That's the practice. I mean, there's, you know, if your board asked for a different approach, we could evaluate a different methods and approaches. There's different ways with different targets. We could have a target range that would potentially have some smoothing effects on the rate increases. If it's between 8 and 12, we don't adjust and we write it out. So there's different ways to do it. This is just the practice that we've agreed upon up to this point and worked with your board on. So if we wanted to make changes in that vein, we could certainly explore that.
The swing isn't very much in the end on the bill, but it is,
It is a swing, yeah.
but it's pretty small when you see what the
real dollars, but somebody can say, you're up 11% or 12%. And you say, well, it's only 10 cents. I mean, they don't depend on your product. It's just a perception. Yeah.
And I will say we do track we have a comparison chart from jurisdictions across the region. So we're tracking how we compare to other jurisdictions that might have a little bit different methodologies. Many others project costs forward and we don't project costs because of the unknowns. And if I could project the fuel futures, I would be a rich man. But so sorry. And we do comparatively well. We kind of track comparative with the other jurisdictions. We're on the lower end of costs. So I think our model has served our community pretty well. But it's certainly something that we could explore changing.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Tree.
2 thumbs, 1 for each.
Commissioner Willie? Commissioner Fye?
I have a question. I think first, the policy question is a yes for me. It sounds like you did I appreciate your rate review process layout, and it was very extensive. My question is the second question you have, and I'm wondering the communication mechanism or plan to communicate this. This is a big change. I live in Aloha and waste management is my, so like what would the communication look like and whose responsibility is that? Is it the certificate holder or is it Washington County who will communicate? Just quickly, if you could just high level process.
Of course, thank you for the question, Commissioner Fry. I will share that our team is pre-planning for an effort. We didn't want to put too much resources into an effort where we didn't know it was gonna be approved yet. The program would roll out October 1st, so there's time to make adjustments to hauler routes and get ready for some changes and shifting volumes around. That gives our team time to kind of design a communication campaign. I will say the responsibility is shared. We would put notification in the rate increase notifications. We have plans for social media campaigns, for billing inserts and things like that. We probably won't do a direct mailer. Those are really expensive. I think it costs us about $18,000 to mail a direct mailer to everybody, but we will do inserts in the rate increase notification. So we have a plan and we can share more about that plan as it gets more hashed out, but we're just getting started on that. So that is a big part of this effort. And one of the things about just adding it and not changing the frequency is many people might not know there was a change. And so it's really leans into our need to do that education effort to make sure that we notify folks about the opportunity to do that.
Many of us have seen that before. So if Commissioner Fry needs additional information, I urge her to meet with you directly.
Absolutely.
And my follow-up to that, Tom, thank you, is if the adjustments become effective in August 1, and you mentioned
October
October,
1st, yeah.
what the impact financially to residents?
Yeah, so we opted to recommend the rate increases all go into effect at the same time, so we don't have two rate changes in the matter of 2 months. The effect is about 88 cents, I think, because 2 months of that rate increase is associated with that. It would be August and September. And
Worst case is slide 10. Right?
yeah, let's see, we get to slide 10. Yeah, so 48 cents per month. And if the rate adjusts on August 1st, then August and September would not include the food yet.
Mhm.
And that 48 cents would still be in the rate. And that is because just the challenge of adjusting the rates twice in the matter of 2 months, and even the cost of mailing out a second notification would probably absorb just as much of the kind of revenue differential on that. So that's the approach that we're recommending.
Thank you.
Two thumbs up.
Yeah, no, fine.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
As orderly as ever. Next, the proposed amendments to the solid waste and recycling administrative rules.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. We will go ahead and just transition straight into this. But just so a reminder, we will come back to you on June 27th for an action item related to your approval of the prior work session item.
All right, thank you. I don't need to introduce myself again. We are Mira.
But
and
you're more
Tom.
than welcome.
So our second agenda item, I'll say we had this combined and I tried to put it together and it was confusing me. So I figured I'd spare you two of
Thank you.
the different action items. We are going to come back on the 27th if your board gives direction on this item as well with two separate action items. So there will be kind of a same kind of package going forward. And here we're talking about administrative rules, and this is how we functionally change programs. The rates are how we finance those program changes. So the agenda, we'll do the purpose and desired outcome again, the policy question, just a quick overview of the rule changes, and then an overview of that stakeholder engagement again. So the purpose here is to provide your board an overview of the proposed amendments to the solid waste and recycling administrative rules regarding collection service in unincorporated Washington County. And our desired outcome again is to receive direction for an action item on June 27th. The policy question here is, should the solid waste and recycling administrative rules be amended to allow for an urban residential food waste collection program, require notice of reduced rate program, and make minor quality improvement adjustments to the additional recycling collection program, also called Recycle Plus? So the proposed rule amendments in this package are small. They look bigger than they are because we moved a section of the administrative rules to a new section. So it looks like a huge red line, but it's not. There's really just two small changes in there, I promise you. The first change in the rules, that is the most substantive change that relates directly to the previous discussion, is adding yard debris food waste to the urban unincorporated residential yard debris collection service beginning October 1st, 2023. So that is a change. It's a pretty simple change in these rules. We also added notice requirements for the reduced rate program. You might remember last year, your board approved a reduced rate program. That program started on January 1st of this year, and we've been receiving applications, and we're just trying to get the word out every way we can. And so we've added some notice requirements related to people that are in arrears or getting past due bill balances, that those notices coming from their certificate holders must include a reference to the reduced rate program, just to provide another vehicle for information to the customers. And then we've also made a couple of quality improvement adjustments to the Recycle Plus program. We talked about this a little bit in April at our Recycle Plus update. One of those is we wanted to make it explicitly clear that this program was available to multifamily customers effective July 1st of this year coming up. And we did that by actually creating a new section in the administrative rules. This is where it's resulted in all the redlining, because the previous program was embedded in the residential services section. And so if you wanted to take a strict legal interpretation, I look at our attorneys because they do those things. It would have been a little bit messier than what we wanted it to be. So we put it in its own section and made it very clear it applies to multifamily households. And we also added a requirement for electronic on-call pickup request options, which is one of the big pieces of feedback we got early on. People didn't want to make phone calls to make a request. So we're requiring that those be made available on the website by the certificate holders. And then also changing the hauler provided bags to be county approved, because that was another big area that we received a lot of feedback on, and we were able to troubleshoot it together. But just to memorialize that change in the admin rules, we're proposing we do that here. Stakeholder engagement, May 18th, the GRAC voted unanimously to recommend these changes to your board as well. We did do an interested parties notification for this action item as well. We did receive one public comment. It wasn't related. It was actually related to a rural community member asking if they could get yard debris service. So we talked with that community member offline and suggested that we can talk further with them about that and understand the different nature between rural and urban neighborhoods. And if they had a bunch of neighbors that were interested in it, then encourage them to reach out to us so we can have a bigger conversation as well. And then we also received support from the Washington County Hauler Association on these rule changes as well. And back to our policy question, I think I did it under 10 minutes. I was worried when I saw the 10 on there.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on the administrative rules? I don't have any questions on the rules, but rather I have a question with regard to the urban multifamily customers for Recycle Plus.
Yes.
And could you just bring to life for us how that process works? So, for example, there are row houses that people live in. There are apartment buildings with stairs and whatnot. How will the actual pickup occur? Will there be a variety of ways? Do you work with, or does the waste hauler work with each of the landlords? How does that work?
It's a very good question. We're looking forward to learning from this opportunity as well. This is a great opportunity for us to provide services like Recycle Plus, learn from that, and then think about like, how do we get food scraps collection into these properties as well? So we are working, a team actually with City of Beaverton staff and our staff are working together to go out and recruit a couple communities to join us. We're going to offer to pay for the first 3 months of service if they have tenants that are available with our budgets, and provide some kind of a learning opportunity for us to understand that. So it's all going to look different. If it's a multifamily complex with an elevator and a lobby, it's not going to be able to be at customers' doorsteps. There might be a place out by the trash enclosure or an enclosed trash enclosure. We could stage the bins, identify the bins associated with the apartment units, so that there would be the same bin. If it's a traditional, what we see a lot in Washington County, 3-story complex of 300 units, the first level might be able to be serviced at their door. There's some fire code issues that we're talking through that we discovered through a different program. It relates to what sits outside of a door in a ingress or egress. Also areas, some properties use garages to store bulky items or reuse items and do reuse exchange items. So maybe we're working with properties to identify a garage on their property that tenants could bring their bins to and set them out for collection. So it's going to be a variety of ways that it's going to be delivered. We're also open to learning that maybe the 18-gallon purple bin is not the right bin in a multifamily setting, and we need to think about some way to scale this up so there can be a shared service model and folks bring items to the property manager's office and then they set them out for collection when on the schedule. So it's going to be a really interesting learning opportunity. The rules, the way we're written, and we're working with the Hauler Association, is we understand that if a customer calls to request a service after July 1st, we can't just say that service is not available to you. We have to engage with the customer and the property manager to identify whether the property manager will agree to bring them service onto their property, and then staff are available for technical assistance, kind of troubleshooting
So it sounds to me like you're really seeking early adopters to help design the program
Absolutely.
collaboratively with you.
Absolutely.
And I'm not speaking on behalf of my commissioner districts, but we do share constituents. And to the degree that we can help, thank those community members for helping us figure out a system that will work across more people. Let us know.
Great.
Because it's a contribution that people are making to help us figure out how to provide this service. And it's something too that will challenge our haulers to figure out what works for their logistics as well.
Yeah.
So we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And we've talked about the haulers about whether we want to identify rules, like it has to be on the first floor only and not the second floor. And we all agreed that we don't have enough experience to create wise rules, and we don't want to make ourselves into a corner that we don't want to be in. So we're going to take it head on and learn from it and do the best we can. And then we can learn from that experience and see how we can improve going forward.
Great. Well, thank you for helping me better understand that. So for our policy question today, nobody had any questions. So it looks like we're a-okay to move forward with the rules.
Thank you so much. We'll see you on the 27th.
Thanks for being so clear about it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty then, we'll move along to the fifth item for this afternoon or for the work session, and that is on the Emergency Management System 911 Transportation Franchise Agreement. And I know staff, you've been working really hard on this and appreciate all that you've been doing. Do we need to bring up another chair for Tim or is he just here on call? Welcome, team members. I know you have a lot to cover. I know you've been working on this.
Thank you, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. We're excited to be back. We have a short presentation and then, of course, questions and answers. We want to go over a little bit of setting the stage of how negotiations went with AMR, talk about the next steps, and talk about the franchise agreement, of course, for our 911 emergency medical services in Washington County. When I talk about the franchise agreement, I want to really highlight some of the key pieces that we took from the proposal that AMR made for the request for proposals back in December, January. I also want to highlight some of the items that were negotiated and then, of course, propose our question to you of bringing it back on the 27th for an action item as our desired outcome. Today, we really want your feedback as well, so that when we present on the 27th, we present a full, all the information that you want to see. So our negotiation with AMR went really well. We made our needs very clear. Of course, the RFP was quite robust that went out and outlined all the pieces that our EMS Alliance and partners put together for our system redesign. And so we really represented that piece. We also brought the pieces that our EMS Alliance had as priorities for that system redesign to the table. The negotiations were really positive, and I realized the tone of my voice was a little surprising. I definitely went into this having watched some neighbors go through it, not knowing what to expect. We really had fantastic conversations. We had special ones with just the medical folks. We had all the players at the table and really good conversations throughout the process. So that was an experience I may not have been expecting. And then we really want, on the 27th, we want to bring for next steps, our action item of bringing the franchise agreement to you for the board packet for the 27th, of course, the entire
Of July.
Sorry. Thank you.
I'm still looking forward to June 27th.
Thank you.
Oh, that's a typo. It's June 27th. I'm so glad that you got that. I don't know where that came from. June 27th And so you'll have, of course, the entire franchise agreement as part of that board packet. And then our presentation will include what it includes today, and we'll expand on that based on your questions and concerns voiced today. And then finally, our targeted transition date is August 1st of this summer.
I can't believe summer is like, whew, here.
Rolling along.
Yeah.
And our transition date, just so you know, as well, and for the record, we have a whole group of people who are meeting now every week to talk about the transition, to look at any concerns that they can think up and figure out solutions for them. So it really is a collaborative effort. Looking forward to this pretty big transition August 1st. The overview of the franchise agreement, just to refresh your memory, it's a 5-year contract with 2 options to extend for 3 years each, making it an 11-year contract in total if all the extensions are added in, at which point we go back to RFP or competitive review process. It does, I'm going to say, of course, it does, of course, include the tiered system. So we'll be using both basic and advanced life support ambulances in the system, which we're pretty excited about that shift as well. When a person calls 911, they will get to WACA. WACA will dispatch the ambulances. This is new for our system. And we're working very closely with them and AMR to make sure that the transparency of where ambulances are in the county is very clear to WACA as well as our fire partners. That was one of the big things we wanted in this system design. AMR is also independently reaching out and talking with fire agencies as they are allowed to subcontract if they want on either side. But if a fire agency does any response, they're held to the same response standards and clinical standards that AMR is. And then finally, there were sections in the franchise agreement around the employment environment, around hiring within diversity, allowing for scholarship programs to promote up into paramedic, and then also just looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion and having training available to staff as well. So then to the four negotiated pieces. So these are new. Nationwide, there's a ongoing struggle in the EMS system and really the entire medical system around staffing, exacerbated by COVID when many people left the medical services. That includes the 911 side as well as hospitals. Part of what this does nationwide is make a struggle while dropping patients off at the emergency departments. The wait times can get longer. We negotiated in 3 pieces of this. One, the county program will bring together a task force of hospital staff, emergency department staff, probably fire and AMR as well, to look at what our options are and get creative and try to make really more broad brush solutions. AMR will partner with the emergency departments and test projects or programs to reduce wait times on their end. And then finally, if AMR experiences significantly longer than normal wait times at hospitals, they can ask for exceptions for long response times that occur during that time or because of those wait times. The next one has a weird title. It's not quite accurate. As you may recall, we came and talked about the transport rates, having both advanced and basic life support transport rates and bringing them to the right level to capture the uncaptured insurance money that was on the table. We're adding in one additional fee that the AMR can charge. The caveat is it's only charged to the government payee. So Medicaid, as an example, and it can only be charged if there's no out-of-pocket charge to the patient, no out-of-pocket cost. And so those were important components of this addition.
What those fees are?
Yeah, so one of the specific fee for Medicaid is treat without transport. Medicaid allows for that to be charged to Medicaid, and there's no copay from the patient. And so that way, if AMR goes up and they treat on site and don't end up transporting because the person refused or whatever, they can still recuperate some of those funds,
I see.
otherwise left on the table.
Otherwise, they have to transport to get paid. Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've rendered the aid and they'll get some portion of that.
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. That makes sense.
The work they've done.
We agree. The other two, one of it is our, every year, we do a regular update in the transport fees. This time we negotiated that as long as it's within the mathematical confines, which includes the consumer price index and Medicare annual inflation factor and the cost recovery from AMR to the government payers and how they collect from them. If it fits in with that, it'll be an automatic update. If there's extraordinary circumstances and there's a different request for increase, then it would come to the board. And then each of these, the automatic would just take effect July 1 of each year. Of course, if there was an extraordinary circumstance, it would come here in the spring sometime.
I have to say, I don't understand the second bullet point.
As long as, so there are times we've seen in the past where the expenses and the costs of doing business have skyrocketed. And so if that came and AMR said, we can't, the mathematical formula gives us a 3% increase, but we're whatever extraordinary circumstances happening, we can't do business, then we would come here and say, here are the reasoning, here's why a larger increase is being requested. I don't see that as a very frequent thing. Most of the time, what this will do is just make a more automatic process.
Yeah, so CPI is automatic, doesn't come to us, but anything above and beyond that does.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And you'll see in the franchise agreement, the formula. And so that it's real cut and dry.
Okay.
The other piece is, as you know, one of the big things, very novel and new things in this franchise agreement is we are bringing in clinical performance measures. So it's not solely about how fast an ambulance can get to a patient, but how well they respond to a patient. Everyone's excited about it, but everyone recognizes it as very new with not a lot of research or studies or ground to stand on. So we moved all of our clinical standards into an appendix D, so that our medical folks can work together over time and tweak them to make them make sense as we learn more about the data that starts to roll in. Part of that is also we're allowing a ramp up time so that AMR can get their feet under them and start collecting data, so we can look at the data, look at what we're measuring, and make sure that it all makes sense.
It'll really be ground truth
It's
in our current community and will evolve from there.
Yeah, and as a side note, we have we're getting fairly regular inquiries from other communities who are like, hey, we hear, because these people gossip. We hear that you're doing this thing. I think the furthest I've heard now is Florida. Tell us what you're doing. So that's, it's a little scary, but really exciting. But within the negotiations, we decided we really wanted to have this as an open conversation. So we moved it to an appendix so that it could be updated as we take it to our quality improvement committee, as we work with our medical directors. And so that's one of the other changes. So a few new provisions were added in. The proposal that AMR submitted for our RFP included some really neat stuff. So we took it from the proposal and put it in the franchise agreement. A few of those things include a robust community education and outreach program paired with community safety programs. So training on compressions only CPR is an example of some of that outreach, as well as various health related outreach. So that's very exciting. Part of what we'll do in the first year is a cultural competency and health equity assessment, followed by a work plan based on that assessment. And then really a whole section on equity commitments and outcomes for this franchise agreement. So those are things that are near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to see them in there. So now to our desired outcome. We are really looking for your support in bringing the franchise agreement to the June 27th action item as an action item. And then if that is favorable, any feedback that you have on this presentation, information that you would like to have added to the presentation on the 27th so that you have what you need in front of you and on the record.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do, but I'll defer to you if you want to go first.
Oh, and I will add, we have a whole contingent of AMR folks in the room who can answer questions as well. So they are here if you have specific operational questions. Thank you.
I have no questions. Really good work with this. Thank you.
I don't have any either. I think the big issue will be the monitoring, because this whole thing of the timeliness of transmission. I think it's like looking for unicorns. There are so many circumstances, everything from traffic jams to accidents to hospitals who say, I only have one doc and two nurses on, I can't take your patients. I mean, it's a recipe for really problematic kinds of measurements. So
The system is definitely strained.
yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fye?
I don't have any questions just per se. I think you all have been very forthcoming and diligent with your process. I did want to ask the question about, AMR has been in the news lately, and I think I'll remiss of myself if I didn't ask how much of that have you weighed in going forward with your conversation about? And I appreciate the new revisions. I think that's really grounding, especially where the world is heading.
Thank you. I'll start with an answer and then see if any of the AMR folks want to add. We've been watching the news very carefully, and I would say while Multnomah County has been able to have the spotlight on them for a while now, in the last few months, it's not very much different than the system in general. All the systems are strained right now. They've had a few unfortunate large stories hit the news. It is something we're looking at. We're talking very closely with AMR as we get toward the August 1st transition date to look at staffing, to look at their capacities so that they're ready to go when they hit the ground running. There are some differences between Multnomah County and Washington County. Multnomah County requires 2 paramedics in each ambulance. I'm going to say we never have. We actually just had this question that we had to answer, and for the last franchise agreement, which went back to 97, we've always had 1 paramedic and then an EMT as the second. And so that allows us greater capacity within the system. The additional piece is as we move more into the kind of officially into the advanced and basic life support, that adds more capacity to our system. You may have heard Multnomah County is piloting that now too, kind of in the same way that we're currently piloting it. So we'll hit the ground doing it more official from dispatch in the fall, which will add capacity as well. And let me pass it and make sure there's no one behind. Anybody want?
So I would like to add on that. We've made it abundantly clear to our potential franchisee that they need to be on the ground and running on August 1st and need to be successful. And they have said they are going to be. And I've impressed upon them that our board expects them to be on the ground and running and successful on August 1st. So they can comment on that. You've received a letter from them on this issue. There's one other unique issue that happens in Multnomah County that's different. There's a lot of unique things that are different. Volume is much higher. The 2 paramedic requirement. They have a lot more really serious incidents that happen in, severity. Not to say that we don't have severe incidences, but they have a lot of them. And then they have just a different relationship with their fire there, and fire doesn't transport near as often in what we call level 0. Whereas here, fire typically transports as well in level 0. So you don't run into crazy situations like you've seen in the news where fire's just sitting there.
Yeah, and to add on to that, and I think both of them looked at my notebook here because they stole all of my answers. And
This happens when you sit in the middle.
I know. To the point of the relationships of our fire colleagues, I think that is something that is uniquely different here than it is, especially in Multnomah County. To the point where we are putting that into the contract, the ability to have those partnerships to build capacity within the system. So if there is strain, whether it's an influx of calls that wasn't necessarily planned for or historic data didn't predict, hospital wait time just goes through the roof for whatever reason, pending strikes, those types of things. We can look to our fire colleagues for that increased capacity.
Thank you. I appreciate that informative and educational answer. Thank you.
Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of follow along with that. One of the, just looking backwards, some of our historical issues have been that we had to have the fire departments transport, and they don't like to do that. So I understand there can be the exception to that rule. I would like to make sure that it doesn't occur often, because I don't want the fire departments coming into us and complaining again. I think I'd kind of like to have AMR come to the table and answer these questions, if I could, please, so we can get them on the record. Okay.
I would like to invite representatives from AMR up to the table following our rules of procedure.
Is that what I said?
No, the chair has to do it.
Yes.
Oh, didn't know that.
Read the rules of procedure.
That's your job. You tell me.
So your job is to read them too and follow them. Welcome.
Well,
Could you
good.
please introduce yourself
Yes.
and take the opportunity to answer the question at hand? Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, I guess it is. I'm Randy Lauer. I'm the Vice President of Operations for AMR. I've been with AMR and its predecessor for 42 years. I've been a Washington County resident for those 42 years as well. I was involved with Washington County pre-96 when the first contract started. So I go back a long ways, and I'm as old as I look, I think, so. But,
And your
you look-
colleagues?
You look young to me.
Yeah, you're in
Yeah,
good company.
thanks. Thanks,
That's
Kevin.
right.
To my left is Jennifer Romero. She's gonna be our operations manager here in Washington County. Her background is most recently in education. She has a master's. She runs a paramedic school. Prior to that, she was a paramedic and a training officer for an ambulance company. And right there is Jake Shores. He's gonna be our clinical quality improvement and data manager. Over here is Rob McDonald. He's our Multnomah County operations manager. He's been helping with this whole process, as is, dozens of people in the background. It's very complicated to do something like this. Luckily, we've been through it a few times before and have a little bit of experience. So that's who we are. Did I miss anyone? Right back there's Kevin Anderson. He's currently working directly with WACA as a liaison. There's a lot of connections that need to be made, and so Kevin's kind of our point person of doing that. I think that's everybody, but it's great to see y'all.
The question at hand?
Okay, well, just a couple of comments. I am looking forward to this new better level of service that we're getting with advanced life support and basic life support. I think it's a great addition to our EMS system. I'm looking forward to, quite frankly, a better level of service. And that's not a knock against Metro West. It's just, I don't want to send the news alongside of Multnomah County. So I have had conversations with our attorney to make sure that we have performance requirements in there and quite frankly, some teeth. I think the document's probably a very long and lengthy document that I'm not going to read, so I'm going to trust him to do that. Yeah, so how we doing? I have this document here that's kind of some old information, and then I have your letter here. So how we doing on hiring these EMTs and paramedics, because they're obviously in short supply?
Okay. Great question. EMTs are actually not as much of a problem. There's quite a few EMTs available. We anticipate 76 EMTs to fill out our core schedule and 50 paramedics. I think we're up to 40 paramedics now.
Yes.
Made a little progress just since I wrote this letter yesterday.
Yeah, this is 24, and this one here, you added a few more, so yeah.
So we've got 6 weeks left. We're on a pretty good trajectory. We can bring in some folks from other parts in the country if we were a little bit short August 1st, which I don't think we will be. But then in September, there's a lot of paramedics graduating from the schools that kicked back in a couple of years ago. So there's going to be more of a supply of paramedics. How long the shortage lasts on a national basis is your guess is as good as mine. It's really the pandemic hit all of healthcare really hard.
Okay, yeah, jump right in there.
EMS, I mean, the Metro West, their folks that obviously not be employed. What's happening to them? Are you employing any of them?
Yes, we're offering them preference, and
Oh, good.
most of
Okay.
probably 2/3 of them or
Yes.
more
Yeah, at least
have
2/3.
committed so far.
Good.
So Commissioner Willie, how many more questions are you proposing
probably-
you ask to the actual contractor?
How you doing on ambulances? You had ordered 30? Those still gonna be on track there?
Yeah, we expect the first 6 to show up probably next week. And we're gonna get those configured with the mobile data computers, and everything needs to go inside of them. And then test the connection to WACA. So we'll have at least a month to do all that and work through any bugs. All 30 will be here. Well, they're all completed now. They're just going through some final QA. But they're all basically ready to be delivered next week. I told them not to deliver them all next week, just send us 6 so we can get them outfitted and start working with them and testing them. And then also if we can offer some staffing help between now and August 1st, 'cause that's one of the concerns that Fire Service Partners has, is that, in a lame duck kind of a role, any provider staffing starts getting diluted, and that's, we shouldn't expect anything different here. So if Metro is not able to keep up with the response time, we want to have some available to back up, as do the fire agencies.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
Just 2. Thank you. All righty. Could you remind us how people apply for these positions?
Jen's been doing a lot of interviewing, so you can probably handle that one.
Of course. So we have an online application that anybody interested could fill out that application. I've also been trying to get my contact information out to everybody. They can reach out directly with any questions prior to that application.
Great.
And we sent out a mailer provided by the state with names and addresses and provider affiliation for 600 EMTs and 600 paramedics across the state. And we actually got quite a bit of interest from outside of Washington County as well.
Okay.
Washington County is being viewed as a new progressive system that people are excited about.
So are we.
Yeah.
And we're not going to let you down.
I think the EMS Alliance and our staff worked really hard to put the RFP together and to modernize the system. And I thank you for it, responding, and for our staff to go through the process. And I'd also like to call out Ms. Kyle, the Assistant County Administrator, who has done a lot of work in this domain. With the recent press that has come out, I had the opportunity to follow up with her and verify my understanding of information. So thank you for making sure that I understood without having to tap into the team members, so who also have done a good job making sure that we have the information we need, that our questions have been asked and answered. So the board is fully all set to move forward with this on June 27th without any other questions. But if we do, we know how to reach you.
Definitely do.
Of course.
We'll be there.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
We'll
Appreciate
see
it.
you that evening, or maybe one of you that evening. Not all of you. Thank you. All right, we've been at this only about an hour, where we will have, after this last topic, leadership communication. And while my voice is definitely not hanging in there, would you like to take a break now? Or a little bit later?
When we get done.
Okay, we're going to proceed apace then with our next topic, which is fair treatment, equal protection, and non-discrimination policy with Ms. Latricia Tillman. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Y'all have had a really long day.
Oh, it's just been a little bit more exciting than usual.
Very exciting. Well, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board. I'm Latricia Tillman, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, and I am here today to talk with you about a proposed policy on fair treatment, equal protection, and non-discrimination. And today just wanted to provide some history, some context, overview of the proposed policy, and an overview of the proposed procedure. And Tom, want to thank you for your support in the development of the proposed policy and procedure. I really appreciate the collaboration. Okay, so want to just walk through civil rights timeline. So the title of the presentation doesn't specifically call out Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, but that really is the impetus for the conversation here today, and we'll get into that in more specifics in a minute. But in terms of the history, the need for civil rights protections exists because of the way our country was founded. And I think this discussion is particularly salient today as you all pass the proclamation of Juneteenth celebration, recognizing the persistent impacts of discriminatory treatment in the country that still exists today. The Constitution of the United States created a structure of inequity in the system of slavery and the genocide of the indigenous Native American community. And it wasn't until nearly 100 years later that the 14th Amendment established equal protection under the law for people born in the United States. However, within 3 decades following that amendment, it was undermined by the Supreme Court decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, which upheld Jim Crow segregation laws and the practice of separate but equal, which allowed discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion. Primarily, it was targeted to people of African descent, but also impacted people of Mexican ancestry, Jewish heritage to a lesser extent, but still had impacts. We think about Jim Crow laws specifically affecting the Black community, but it affected more communities as well. 70 years later, the Civil Rights Act was passed to make discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin illegal. And a decade later, the Supreme Court clarified that language is part of national origin, thus also protected from discriminatory practices and requiring efforts to support language access for people with limited English proficiency. And federal and state laws passed since then have expanded protected classes to include religion, age, disability, sexual orientation, and other marginalized social groups. So Washington County Charter was adopted the year prior to the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And this timeline also reflects progress Washington County has made relative to civil rights, including the adoption of a client civil rights plan in 2016. And more so since your board made significant progress in the past 3 years, beginning with the equity resolution, which specified that the Office of Equity Inclusion, Community Engagement, and the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer would be responsible for the county's civil rights compliance. Additionally, you adopted the limited English assistance policy in 2020, updated the client civil rights plan in 2021, and recently started a conversation specific to policy implementing the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that brings us to the client civil rights policy we're discussing today. So over the past 3 years, that reflects a significant amount of work, big lift for staff and our community partners.
Thank you for doing it.
You're welcome. So Title VII of the Civil Rights Act focuses on employment discrimination. We're not talking about that today. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act focuses on public and clients who use public services. Basically, the language of Title VI says that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. The Americans with Disabilities Act was modeled after the Civil Rights Act and requires all public entities, regardless of whether or not they receive federal funding, to prohibit discrimination based on disability. So our proposed policy actually creates an alignment with both Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the requirements of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So as a county and a recipient of federal financial assistance, there are certain things we cannot do and there are certain things that we must do. So we cannot, through contractual or other arrangements, utilize criteria or methods of administration which could subject individuals to discrimination because of race, color, national origin, or have the effect of impairing those individuals from achieving the benefits of those programs. Title VI plain text and agency regulations clarify that discrimination based on race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, is prohibited. And recipients of federal financial assistance are also prohibited from implementing policies that may seem neutral on their face, but have a but have a disproportionate impact on protected groups. Additionally, Title VI requires recipients to ensure that limited English proficient individuals have meaningful access to programs or activities, benefits, services, vital information, etc. The prohibition against discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin can never be waived. Recipients that provide emergency-related services such as healthcare or law enforcement must comply with Title VI at all times. In fact, complying with these requirements is even more important in times of emergency or disaster, pandemic, which we just are on the tail end of living our way through. So there are some promising practices that ensure Title VI compliance for jurisdictions like ours, and the next 2 slides will speak to the importance really of leadership commitment and the work that the policy will help to codify. So best practices include reaffirming the organization's commitment to non-discriminatory protections, to communication to staff and contractors of your commitment and the organization's commitment to non-discrimination through messaging, training, and policies, to inform participants and beneficiaries of their rights and protections from discriminatory practices, and to collect and analyze information about protected classes to identify barriers. So this ties really clearly with some of the things that we would call equity work or diversity and inclusion work, but it ties directly to implementation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Additionally, promising practices include identifying a point of contact for the public to submit complaints of discrimination with and include diverse communities and seek their participation to inform what's working and not working for their communities, and to assure language access services and translated vital documents are readily available. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about the proposed policy. So we're just gonna provide highlights of the proposed policy. You have the whole proposed policy and proposed procedure in your packet, all those Ps. The board will come back if the board directs us to come back to adopt policy, and the county administrator will facilitate the administrative procedure, but we want to share both with you since both the policy and the procedure are new. Okay, so the proposed policy would be that it's Washington County's policy to prevent and remediate discrimination on the basis of an identity protected by federal, state, or local civil rights laws. We want all people to receive quality services and benefits and have opportunities for meaningful engagement in Washington County programs and activities. So the statement is really intended to affirm Washington County's commitment to equal protection and fair treatment for all people who live, work, learn, play, and pray in Washington County, as well as to require taking affirmative action to address past and present discrimination. The proposal goes on to say that it is the policy of Washington County that no person shall, on the grounds of, and here we list out all the various protected classes that are included in federal and state civil rights law relative to the work of Washington County. So race, color, national origin, I'm not going to read them all out. That no person shall, on the basis of one of these protected classes, be excluded from participation and denied the benefits of or otherwise be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity that is a recipient of federal financial assistance. So this is the language that very technically aligns with Title VI of the Civil Rights Law. And as I mentioned, it includes all protected classes in Title VI, ADA, and Oregon law. And then it goes on to say, as I just mentioned, that we will comply with all applicable federal and state agency regulations prohibiting discriminatory treatment in Washington County programs or activities, and to do so whether or not those programs and activities are federally funded consistent with the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1988. So the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1988 basically says that if an agency receives $1 of federal funding in one particular program area, it obligates the entire organization. Okay. Forgetting that my pages are double-sided. Okay. So if we are distributing funds to another governmental agency or subrecipient, Washington County, it will be policy that Washington County would include Title VI language in all written agreements and monitor their compliance. And really there is language in our boilerplate language in all of our contracts. So this is actually already happening. It would just be put into policy. And then the policy would designate the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement as responsible for initiating and monitoring Title VI activities, preparing required reports and updates, coordinating a complaint process, and other responsibilities as required. And this language is actually consistent with the Equity Resolution of 2020. Okay. So in the proposed policy, if you've had a chance to look at, you'll notice there's a lot of definitions. So just for clarity, because this is new to the county and it is fairly complicated, we can talk about any of those definitions if you'd like further clarification. It also talks about applicability, that the policy applies to all Washington County programs, departments, and contractors. And again, that it serves as the foundation by which we ensure that civil rights compliance and build toward greater equity and inclusion for everyone in our community. And then it highlights responsibilities and implementation, which basically brings us back to those best practices noted at the beginning of the presentation to ensure compliance, to administer programs, services, and activities in a non-discriminatory manner, and to review and resolve any client civil rights complaints.
Can I ask a question about that before we get to the procedures? But I realize that the procedures may provide the answer.
Okay.
So I appreciate that there are these promising best practices so that we're clear in terms of, you know, these are requirements, everyone knows, and so forth. But what is the best practice with regard to availability of that information, the frequency of communication? Is that even in the procedures, or how will I know if we're doing okay? Not a very clear question, which is why I thought I would ask here.
It's not significantly detailed in the procedures. However, we have regular conversations with our communications team about the various ways that we would notice the public as it relates to client civil rights and language access and ADA opportunities to request accommodations. So we've been having that conversation. We're waiting for the adoption of the policy, and then we will develop an overarching communication that would be available publicly
So
and on the website.
to help with my foundational knowledge, Ms. Angie, at some point, if you could just give the board a brief overview of what that is, so that I know what best practice we're striving for in terms of our implementation. I think that may help me. I do recall that when we made improvements at Metro, when I was a Metro counselor, there were various techniques tried as well. I sit here today, couldn't rattle off what those were either. So I just want to know what it is we're aiming for. That's all. Thank you.
I have a question too on the policy piece. On page 11, it is the policy of Washington County that no person shall, and the list there, I'm not familiar with seeing or source of income. Is that something that I have missed in the past, or can you describe what that means? The others I'm very familiar with.
This is the benefit, I think, of working across multiple departments to understand how this is playing out in different disciplines, and the source of income is specific to housing. So it relates to discrimination. If you are a Section 8 voucher recipient, that is considered a source of income, and it is illegal to discriminate based.
Okay, thank you. I just had not seen that
Yeah,
before.
I hadn't either.
So thank you.
Thanks for bringing that to life.
Yeah, thank you.
Good question. Yeah. Are there any other policy questions before we move on to procedure? Okay, thank you.
I didn't ask for questions between policy and procedure this time because last time we went right into procedural questions. So
Can I ask a general, just to come an overall general? It seems like we use the term protected class, but everybody's in a protected class, right? There isn't any exceptions to that. So, I mean, I understand the terminology and I understand, but is anybody outside of a protected class?
potentially no, but what has to happen if there is a complaint is that someone would be able to say that it's because of my protected class that I was denied the ability to participate in XYZ service.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Did
I
do
think there
okay?
are people who are outside of protected class.
Okay,
So,
You could argue that it's not. I can see that position. It just,
so then how would this apply if you're claiming to be outside of a protected class? Then does this apply to you?
Well, Ms. Tillman said, it would depend on the allegation. So people are protected based on age, but if you were denied something not that had nothing to do with your age, you could have someone who is a 27-year-old male, not really in any protected class, but if they were discriminated based on their gender, then that would be a discrimination complaint. They'd be outside of any nominal protected class, but you could still have a violation. Does that make sense?
Okay.
so this policy, we do have other Washington County policy that speaks to like discourteous treatment, right? So this policy doesn't cover people being discourteous in general. It would cover people being discourteous on the basis of one of the protected classes.
I see, okay.
Okay. Thank you for those questions. So here we go, procedures, and this is very brief.
This is the exciting stuff.
How? Yeah, yeah.
Always have.
Okay. So in the procedures, basically it says that all county departments and offices in collaboration with the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement shall implement this policy through public communication about how complaints related to the policy will be investigated, and that complaints can also be filed with relevant state or federal agencies as appropriate. Through ongoing data collection and monitoring of programs and activities sufficient to conduct comprehensive analysis and reporting consistent with legal and administrative obligations. So that's where we want to collect demographic data so we can make sure that there's not a disparate impact of a service being delivered. Periodic comprehensive analysis and reporting to ensure compliance consistent with legal and administrative obligations. And so that is something that County Administrator Angie is periodically required to sign off on, like the analysis of impediments for fair housing. Our land use and transportation will also be asked to do similar reporting relative to transportation funding. Our implementation will also focus on supporting manager and relevant program staff training so that they're understanding what it means to administer programs, services, and activities in a non-discriminatory manner, and to cooperate with the review and resolution of any complaint processes pursuant to this policy. In terms of the procedure, County Counsel Carr and I worked together on developing investigatory standards for the investigation of any client civil rights complaints. And so that's included in the procedure, and with obviously with a lot more work that needs to happen. And then there's also a section on contractor compliance expectation and what it means to be compliant or non-compliant. And then the procedure also outlines an appeal process. So when an investigation is completed, if either the complainant or the respondent is not happy with the results of that investigation, they would have the ability to appeal it to the county administrator or her designee.
That's it.
Chair Harrington, may I make a couple of comments?
Absolutely.
So it was a privilege to work on this with Ms. Tillman, and she gives me far more credit than I deserve. I did some, but she took the laboring oar. This has been part of my own journey on this process. And as the lawyer for the county, when I get a complaint, my first thought is, how do I defend the county? How do I reduce liability? And the growth experience has been working with Ms. Tillman to understand that we also have to think about how do we improve? How do we move forward? If we don't investigate complaints and not worry so much about whether we're going to be liable, but how we're going to improve our processes, how we're going to make this a better workplace for our employees, how we make it a better community for our community. It takes a different approach, and it's not necessarily always the lawyer who's going to be the one who's driving this, because I have a contradictory duty. My job is to make sure the county doesn't pay out a lot of money for things. So one of the things that's key for me in this procedure is that there is a detailed investigation process. We've never had that. When we investigate these things, usually it goes to HR, it goes to us, or it goes to an outside counsel, and they do something. And we don't really know what they do. Usually they conduct interviews. This requires a plan. You have to set it out in advance. It tells you how to do it. And all of our investigations going forward, once this procedure is adopted, will be done according to this process, which from my lawyer's heart makes them much more defensible. If we can tell someone who's unhappy about the investigation, that these are the steps that were taken pursuant to our adopted procedure. It makes me feel a whole lot better about the entire process to have that in there. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to work with Ms. Tillman on this, and I think I strongly recommend that you ultimately adopt the policy and that Ms. Angie implement the procedure.
Can I just add to that, just relative to investigations in general, not just civil rights, we are carrying this same process through of creating consistency, whether it's within HR, so consistency of that practice, no matter who is doing the investigation, whether it's an employment, whether it's civil rights, also looking at ADA.
Great improvements. Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions with regard to either the policies or the procedures or our next steps with regard to adoption?
Good job. I really appreciate the information you provided. I concur with Tom. I think we need to move forward to adopt this. So look forward to.
Can you hear that for the recording? Oh, God. Sorry, thank you, Chair. Don't lean back. Message to myself. I was just saying, Ms. Tillman, thank you. It was a really well done presentation, and I really appreciated the information that you provided. And I concur with what our county attorney said, and to bring this forward and to adopt. I think it's a good path forward for Washington County.
I don't have any problems with the proposed or the intent. The only concern I have, Tom, and there are times where we do want to discriminate against people because of their actions, not because of any other base. Are we adequately protected, particularly contractors? That's what I'm worried about, is you wouldn't want to hire somebody that you know has been charged with a number of felonies or problems, or doesn't work well with kids, and all of a sudden they're saying, but I'm protected. Are we okay in that area?
I think in any circumstance, you're going to have people who try to take advantage of a system. But I think we've provided enough safeguards in here to make sure that that doesn't happen. I mean, I think there's always a chance. It's not, no system's 100% perfect, but I think having the details that we have in here provide even more protection.
Great, thank you.
But we never want to discriminate what was described in those protected classes.
No, I believe Commissioner Rogers was using discrimination in its broader context in terms of making a decision.
You wouldn't want to say because somebody was in a protected class, it was okay that they were a pedophile, and we were hiring them to work with kids. Say, no, that's not acceptable. So in a much
100%.
broader sense, it wouldn't be a protection against.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Yeah.
Commissioners Treese and Willie?
Well, is there kind of a template that we follow on this, that kind of some guidelines, and then we modify it and craft it to fit what we want? Or, I mean, this is obviously a lot of very technical and legal work. So is there's kind of a.
We saw there was a site, the Department of Justice has a manual with recommendations.
Okay.
And then we looked at, Ms. Tillman looked at other organizations' policies to get inspiration. A lot of the policy just is based on law, the Civil Rights Acts. And so we're basically just saying we're going to follow those. The procedures took a little bit more time. But there are a lot of opportunities out there. And as I said, the US Department of Justice has guidance that we followed.
Okay. All right. Well, the only other thing is, again, similar to the ADA thing, we use calendar days and business days. Not consistently, so I just want to say, is that okay? Where we use business days in one place and calendar days in another? It's on page, in the packet, it's on page 10 of 32, but I don't know.
We can certainly look at that before we bring it back.
Page 2 of, I'm sorry, yeah, page 2 of 212A. And I was advocating that we use calendar days because business days could include holidays. So calendar days is just calendar days. But that's just my 2 business. So go ahead.
I have no questions. Thank you.
I just have one question, and it's not specific to either the policy or the procedures. But first, before I get to it, I want to say thank you very much to the 2 of you, as well as to the wider team members who have helped ensure that we do formalize our set of policies and our expected procedures. And I also appreciate the level of consistency across not only the organization, but the types of complaints and the handling. It really does speak to how we are improving as an agency and striving to do our best in service to community. So thank you. So this question, I just need a rock solid reminder of how certain systems work. So I understand these policies and I understand the procedure, but then there's also, I need the reminder back in March when we adopted our civil rights plan. How does the civil rights plan factor into all of this? And how frequently does a civil rights plan get updated and examined? I just don't remember those details. And with the timeline slide, I realized, ooh, I've sort of lost sight of that. March feels like a really long time ago now.
It feels so long ago that.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, so.
Is it the EEO?
Was it the
Equal
implement of
employment?
that? Yeah.
Equal employment opportunity?
All I know is what was on the slide, March 20, oh, it was March 2016, good grief.
That's why it's been a long time.
Oh,
Yeah, so there was a Title VI civil rights plan that was adopted in 2016. It was updated in January of 2021 because it did not reflect the existence of a chief equity and inclusion officer.
yeah,
When we started looking at updating the Title VI plan, we realized Washington County doesn't have a Title VI policy.
oh,
So that's how we got here today. So
got
with the
it.
Adoption of policy and procedure, then we can adopt or update the plan, but it didn't make sense to update a plan in the absence of a policy. That's the journey that's been happening over the past 6 months.
Thank you. Got it.
Great. Okay.
And I apologize for not seeing that year reference.
Took a little while to find the actual
Yeah.
month that it was
But we
adopted.
got there.
Yeah.
Yay, yes.
We did.
Okay, so moving forward, will we be able to find time to adopt it this month or will it come subsequently?
Yes. I think we can do the ADA and the Title VI at the same time.
Terrific. Wonderful. Great improvements.
Great.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
And now we'll move to leadership communication. And this is where I promised Ms. Taniguchi Dennis that I would text her.
Oh, she's on.
Oh, she is on.
She is on.
Great. Okay, Thank you.
Chair.
So Ms.
Chair Harrington, I have a matter to attend to, but I'm gonna step away, but I will watch it online to make sure I get caught up on the leadership. So I apologize for stepping away.
Okay,
But
thank you. Go ahead, Miss Angie.
So first I would like to have Mira and Nor come up. So
Oh,
board,
in
I
person.
I'm really excited to introduce to you Nor DeLong. She has been named Health and Human Services Assistant Director. This was an extremely competitive nationwide recruitment that included several stellar internal candidates. Nor has worked for the county since 2019 and has been serving in her current position as HHS Administrative Services Manager for 4 years. Nor's first day in her new role was actually yesterday, June 12th. So she's officially the Assistant Director. Nor was selected for her passion for building positive and strength-based culture, her commitment to our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts, her experience with process improvement and change management. Nor is truly collaborative, people-centered leader who has a proven record of building strong relationships, both internally in a one Washington County manner across departments and also with our community. Nor brings more than 19 years of experience in the public sector. And a little bit maybe personal about Nor, she's lived in Oregon for most of her life, but has also lived in Jordan. She is a proud Middle Eastern American and loves to learn about different cultures and language. Nor loves to read, cook, and explore nature and is happiest when she's outdoors. Sorry, we are indoors right now, and trying new things with her husband, 3 children, 4 siblings, parents, and 7 nieces and nephews.
Yay, being an aunt is awesome.
So just, this is an example of just the great leaders we have within Washington County. And it's also just to celebrate Nor and also just the great talent we have here at Washington County. So Nor, did you want to say anything?
I just, I'm honored to be here today and thank you so much for the introduction. I'm excited to serve HHS and the county in this new capacity and honored to be here. So thank you.
Welcome to your new role.
Yes, yes. And I hope, I am always pleased when our staff apply for positions, but especially when they know that it's going to be a national search. So I hope that you feel super special that we've gone through that extensive search and you've come out on top. And we're really psyched that you've seized the opportunity and to have you. And I think our Health and Human Services Department is a really great department, and all of our departments, all of our employees work really hard. But I know we on the commission have had the opportunity to learn a lot more about the importance of service, providing the service needs of the people who make up our community in new ways and evolving ways. So thank you for stepping forward as a leader.
Thank you so much, Chair Harrington. And I just want to say I'm so pleased and just thrilled. I remember being the hiring manager when Nora came on 4 years ago and being so excited that we recruited such incredible talent. And when she applied and what achieved being the top candidate for this position, I couldn't have been more pleased with the outcome. And I also just want to give a special shout out to our human resources talent acquisition team. They managed this national recruitment for us and they did an incredible job and couldn't be happier with the results. So thank you. And Nor will potentially be coming before the board if there's ever times when I'm out of town or unable to attend. So you may see her face introducing our team members for agenda items.
Just as we saw your face when Ms. Kyle, as the then department director, wasn't available. It happens.
Yes.
Don't worry, we're people too. See? And no question is a bad question at all. So
before Mira and Nora leave, I will just share a Health and Human Services update. Health and Human Services issued an overdose alert last Friday because of the significant increase in overdoses and deaths. The Washington County Sheriff's Office has responded to at least 15 overdoses, including 4 recent fatalities. There may be a dangerous supply of fentanyl containing drugs circulating our area. HHS, the Sheriff's Office, and CAO communications team have collaborated on spreading the word among our public to encourage overdose prevention. And we're asking the board members and others to please share this with your networks. I was really pleased yesterday afternoon to talk to my daughter, who's 12 years old and is in the Beaverton School District, and she shared that they talked about this in multiple classes. I had talked to my kids about this, but just the word is getting out. So you don't always receive that feedback, and here's the feedback directly from a parent. So I do want to thank the Washington County HHS overdose review team for responding so quickly to this situation and preparing the urgent information to reduce harm and save lives. The overdose review team includes members from our public health division, the behavioral health division, as well as representation from our sheriff's office. So just one more example of our One Washington County effort. And with that, that's my only health and human services update. It's not the most uplifting news, but these are the times that we do need to bring awareness to our community and our youth.
Well, so I have a curious question based upon that state of affairs, because the communication encouraged more people to carry Narcan. And I was just wondering, as the provider of multiple public buildings, there are AEDs in different places. Are there provisions for making Narcan? Or whatever, it's not
Naloxone.
Naloxone, thank you, available in different places. So if someone walks into our building, which occurs, we get questions about where's the ballot drop box, where do I pay taxes, help with this, help with that. You know, we're a pretty big public building. So what do we do if somebody says, somebody's overdosing right here at your front door?
Excellent question and suggestion, Chair Harrington. Of course, first and foremost, we always just encourage people not to delay, call 911 immediately. Definitely staff, all community members are encouraged to obtain naloxone, which is they can get from pharmacies throughout the county. And there's on our website, there's a call out right now where people can go with links to information and find the pharmacy locators. But what I'm hearing in your suggestion is perhaps us just having a stash, so to speak, available so that staff or community members could access that. So I can bring that recommendation back to our harm reduction committee. And it's possible they may already have some stashes that I just don't have handy off the top of my head, but I'll follow up and provide.
I should know to run down to that end of the building. How down there, and that didn't occur to me either.
I think you also have on that a little place that you can click for a coupon for reduced price for naloxone. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. See, we have been encouraged to ask.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here and staying so long today too, Nor. The other introduction I would like to make is Michael Bonacore, who's not here right now. He actually had to leave for a meeting, but he is our interim director of
He
housing.
sat through, if I recognize him
was
from
there.
the picture I saw on Horizon, he was.
Yep,
here
he
for
was
like-
by Marty.
We should have just interrupted.
He'll be back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's coming back. So
maybe.
yeah. Michael's leadership and his over 30 years of experience in public and nonprofit sectors, including 20 years at Home Forward, which is the housing authority of Multnomah County. I will hold this until we do have time with Michael to give more of an introduction. I can't say Michael yet at this point without saying Comey as well. So your board has been invited to the send-off for Comey this Thursday at 2 p.m. in Washington Street Conference Center, and just want to continue to express appreciation for Comey. Each meeting conversation that I have with Comey, I think his smile can't really get any larger when he starts to think about spending time with his grandchild and traveling. So really exemplary public service. and appreciated. I do want to move on to library services and share just a recent data point as staff are preparing for your July work session. In fiscal year 21-22, Washington County libraries were the busiest libraries in the entire state per capita. According to the State Library of Oregon annual data reporting, we checked out 10.98 physical and digital materials per county resident. So we are the more busy than any other system in the state. So that just speaks to the relationship amongst the Washington County Cooperative Library System. And with that, that concludes my update.
And we know Washington County loves libraries. Yep. Mr. Carr.
Chair Harrington, a couple of quick updates. The Disability Rights Oregon against Baden case, which involves aid and assist, continues to be interesting. We are in the middle of a mediation to try to, as you may recall, some of the amici have been pushing to provide some sort of safety valve for truly dangerous individuals who are coming back to the community more quickly under Judge Mossman's September 1st order. We're making some progress. I was at mediation yesterday afternoon. They mediated with the DAs on Friday, and then the judges were mediating today. Hopefully there'll be we were close to a resolution yesterday, and I'm hoping that I got closer today. I'm meeting with all of the amici tomorrow. If we have a settlement, I will be scheduling an executive session with you all next week to discuss whether or not Washington County should join in. Further on that when we have more information, which I should have tomorrow. On the drama with Mr. Beshard on Sellers Road, as you may recall, he was released and allowed to visit the property once a day to feed his cats. Mr. Povett in my office insisted that he only be allowed to bring cat food to the property and that he only come with the person with whom he was living. He's apparently violated those conditions. He showed up with more materials that he dumped there. He brought many people, more than a single person. So the DA reported to the court, and apparently he was remanded back to the jail, which is unfortunate. The county has spent $370,000 cleaning up the property thus far. We will be filing a lien against the property by the end of this month, maybe the end of this week, which will ultimately, unfortunately, allow us to take the property if necessary, which is something we've tried to avoid for many, many years. And we don't do it lightly, but as I appreciate the board's patience with this lengthy process, but property rights are protected, and as they should be, and we're taking this step by step, and Mr. Bovett is working very hard. That's my report.
It's very difficult.
Yes, the whole team, Mr. Eggleston, as you know, is leading that work.
I have a question. Did anybody have any questions on Mr. Carr's report up? I have a question, and I'm not sure who to pose it to, Ms. Angie or Mr. Carr. So that's why I thought I'd bring it here. In the constituent report on page 23 of 49, and I'm happy to put this in email, Michael and Shirley Azraelian shared with us information about how they have a rental property and had difficulty with essentially it sounded to me like tenant takeover. And I couldn't tell from the constituent communication how, if at all, the county was able to support the landlord. And I wasn't really sure where to start and pose the question. As a next step, should I just send the email to the two of you?
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm just trying to get better prepared so that if someone were to ever ask me, that I would know, where to begin. And that's why I'm asking. I flat out don't know. So great. Thanks for helping me get better. I appreciate it. Hello, Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, Clean Water Services. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Board of Clean Water Services. I want to extend a warm welcome back to Chair Harrington and the Clean Water Services team from your long journey. I hear it took over 30 hours and for some folks, 40 hours to get back home. We're just thankful that you're all home and that the trip was good. It was an honor for Clean Water Services to be selected to participate with the Association of East Asian Nations in their U.S. partnership on smart cities and water infrastructure, to be able to share our knowledge, to exchange ideas, and to help make a difference. The Vientiane City Office for Management and Services team will be visiting Clean Water Services in October as part of their travel to WEFTEC, and we are planning for their visit and hope our board members can also meet VCOMs in the work that we do with them. The Clean Water Services team is learning and conducting an exercise about earthquake emergency response, about how Clean Water Services will operate its field incident command and the role of Clean Water Services EOC in context with the county's EOC as part of the shakeout event. We realize we have lots of new team members and that are new to understanding about emergency management and the roles of the EOCs, and as well as our incident command. And our preparedness is going to be a continual part of the work that we do together. So thank you.
And I think it's unique for the Clean Water Services team that if I'm articulating this correctly, Diane, that in your prior role here at CWS, prior to becoming CEO, and I may have the dates wrong, but you participated in tabletop exercises with regard to earthquake preparedness. Am I right about that?
Yes, I was able to be part of Washington County's contingent that went back to Emmitsburg, Maryland to train at FEMA on this topic. And I'm hoping we can one day do that again. It was very meaningful, and I'm able to support the Clean Water Services team in their learning about how we will respond. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I think we as the board of directors of Clean Water Services also have the benefit to have you help us internalize what such a situation might be like. You know, it's pretty mind blowing. You know, it's how else does one visualize or understand what happened, right? It's not just in the movies. So that might be an interesting opportunity to hear from you what, given your long tenure here in Washington County, but also with Clean Water Services, what are some things you want us to be mindful of as an experience for our community? So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are there any other communication items that you want to share? Well, I thank you very much for getting through this morning's difficult meeting and appreciate your hanging in there with our multiple topics this afternoon. So here we are at 3:15 and we'll adjourn today's work session. Thank you.